Session of the Albion City Council, Monday, November 19th, 6 p.m. I call this study session to order. We'll begin with a roll call. Clerk Domingo.
Councilmember Barnes. Reed. Brown.
Here.
Waller.
Here.
Spicer.
Here.
French.
Here.
And Mayor Brown.
Here. Items for individual discussion, 2019 budget. We're going to talk about a couple of the funds, and we have our Finance Director here, so I will turn it over to Director Mead, Tom Mead.
Thank you. Tom Mead, Finance Director. You should have before you not only the agenda, but attached to that, the various funds we're going to talk about. And because of the funds are actually printed out in fund order numbers, so my recommendation is, rather than going in the order on the agenda, if we could just maybe go through the order they are in your report. That way we won't be flipping back and forth. And if that works for everybody, we will start with the first one, which is Fund 208. And just to back up a little bit too, because we only had an hour, we're going to try to, we picked some of the funds that are pretty basic, and as you'll see as we get into some of these are not some of the more involved funds. These are some of the more straightforward ones, hopefully, that we'll be able to cover pretty quickly. So if you have questions, definitely feel free to stop me. But I'll try to move through fairly quickly and only point out changes or differences or things that may look a little different from prior years. And again, having said that, Fund 208 is our recreation fund. And there are a few quirky things on that I should point out. Nothing too major other than if you look across, and by the way, we'll probably be focusing on the rightmost two columns, because the second to the farthest to the right is 2018 projected, which of course, as you're aware, that's where we think we're going to end up at the end of the year. Those numbers will probably become our amended budget for 2018. And then the far right column will be the 2019 numbers or budgeted numbers that we're presenting for your approval in December. And if you look across the very top line, current property taxes, you'll see a little bit of a spike going from where we project 113.5 up to 149.5. That's simply the result of the new recreation millage. So thank you to citizens of Albion for that. That definitely will give them a little more breathing room, as you'll see as we go down through this. Right above the gray bar there, the gray of course has our comments in there. I wanted to point out in the original 18 budget, we thought we would get a Conan grant, a grant from Conan Foundation to cover the rent at the school. Then we thought, okay, Conan's going to pay that directly to Marshall Public Schools, so we took it out of the projection, thinking it was going to be paid directly to the school. Just today, I was handed that check. So we may be, I got to check with Marshall Public Schools, see how they want to handle it. That 20 may be going back in, but if it does, a related expense at the bottom will show it coming back out, so it'll be a wash either way. But just to let you know, could potentially be a change on that line. Everything else is pretty much the same. If you look at total estimated revenues, about halfway down, there is a jump for 19 again, which is a direct result of the new millage. And again, moving further down, above the second gray bar down there, again, the 27.5 that we had in that original budget column, we took it out again because that was the 20,000 we thought was going to be paid directly to Marshall Public Schools. So if that money does flow through us, it'll reappear in those columns. But next year, we will not receive that grant because that was the purpose, or part of the purpose of the increased millage, was to help cover that rental of the building up there. With that, the only other thing I'll point out, the very last gray bar there on the far right column, 25,000. Going forward, we are going to start reporting the rental in the actual building rental account rather than up under that program expenses account. So for 19, 25,000, which is my understanding, the rent's going from 20,000 up to 25 and 19, and it is reflected there in that far right column. Flipping the page, you will see that they would end up with a about $11,000 loss this year, which again, that's why we're thankful for the new increased millage. For 19, we are looking at a just over just under $500 profit, I guess. Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So, in looking at the recreation budget, for 2019, the millage is included, correct?
Correct.
So that gives us an increase to
Correct.
149.
Yep.
If we add in the 25,000 for the rent, right?
Add
And then
out, deduct, you mean? I mean,
Well, yeah, deduct that. Okay, so
Gotcha,
this is
yep.
what I did. I took the 113, I added 25, that gave me 138.
okay,
So 138 minus 149 is 11,000.
Okay.
Right? So I'm looking at the 11,000 that we were in the negative for this year, and at the end of 2019. So am I understanding correctly that none of the money from the millage is going to be spent on additional programming?
Actually, not quite, because the increase from the millage, we are expecting about another, I gotta do the math here, 113.5 to 149, so you're talking a little over 30-some thousand, which of course is more than the 20,000 Cronin grant. We have increased some of the expenditures in talking with the recreation director. The program expenses, we did increase them or bump them up some, but it's kind of confusing because he was paying a lot of the salaries for coaches and referees and lifeguards and that out of program expenses in the past. Really, those should be reflected in salaries. Those are employees, even though they're temporary, those are actual employees. So there is a little bit of a bump up in the salary and wages, and in addition, keeping the part-time or the program expenses about the same and bumping up the part-time salary and wages. So that's where you're going to see a lot more of the funds going towards program expenses is in the increase. Like for example, 2018 we had 57.5 in part-time wages. We bumped that up to 62.5. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're paying part-time people, seasonal people, a couple hours here, a couple hours there, that's a lot of coaches or a lot of lifeguards. It adds up to a lot of hours. So that's part of it. Another thing that bumped up some is just below the second grade bar is the senior center. This has not been confirmed, but we have paid them $8,700 of the millage money for several years, and because the millage is bumped up, we felt, well, we probably should pay them a little more. Nothing's been set in stone, but we did bump that figure up to $10,875. So a little bit of that additional would be diverted over to the senior center. So if that helps, again, no. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes. Councilmember Spencer.
Thank you, Mayor. And Tom's, the senior center, can you basically explain what the 8,700 was for?
As far as what they use it for over there, I'm not 100% sure. But ever since when the millage was first passed back in, I don't know the year it was first passed, it was agreed upon that the recreation would divert some money to the senior center for the senior programs. And it has been set at the $8,750 for several years, or $8,700, for several years. I don't know exactly what programs they run with it over there, but it is money that was part of the agreement when the millage was passed. And I don't know how the ballot was worded, if there was anything in there specifically, do you recall, Jill, or?
I think there was in that original millage.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what did you?
I think there was in the original, when they passed the original millage, that there was language in there for the senior center.
Was it a percentage or a specific amount or,
I don't recall there being any specifics on it. I think it's just kind of an agreed upon amount each year.
Okay, so, one last question.
Sure.
So they have not asked for an increase in funding? They just
Correct.
decided to bump it up.
Correct. Well, I think you're correct, but everything's been kind of verbal, and I think it was kind of implied to them that if more came in, it would be only fair that we give them a little bit of an increase simply because we haven't in several years. But you're correct. Nothing's been written or promised or anything to them. Yep. I'm sorry, did you?
I did,
Councilmember Brown.
thank you, Mayor. So this probably is not a question for you, but, my thought is that if there's a projected budget, there has to be an idea how many is gonna be spent. And I think it's important for us to find out what additional programs, if any,
Okay.
will be available for 2019. I can address that at our regular meeting, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Sure, that makes
If you're
sense.
asking for money, you've gotta know where you're planning
Right.
to spend, so, thank you.
It makes sense, and we can pass that along.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm gonna flip down to page 3. Page 3, part of the recreation millage, that there was, as you are aware, there's always these departments within funds. One of them was a positive youth development. That only is appearing because of 16 activity that hasn't dropped off yet. There's no activity for 17, 18, or 19, so we'll flip to the next page. Same thing with the junior optimists. Again, it's appearing because of activity in 16 and a real little bit in 17, but nothing for 18 or 19. And if you flip to the, flipped one too many, got ahead of myself. So if you look at the very bottom of that page 4 of 4, under, it shows the beginning fund balance for recreation and the ending fund balance. So the $11,000 loss would take their fund balance from 105,933 down to 94,008, and then with a slight profit next year, it would remain about the same at 95,348 for a 2019 ending fund balance. If that, any questions on that? All right, moving on to the next page. Fund 248 is DDA. At first appearance, looks like some great news there, because you look across at the current property taxes, big jump there. We've collected almost 63,000 this year, projecting to end the year about 76, and next year roughly 77.5. If you look back historically, they collected nothing in 17 and only 8,800 in 16. And the reason they didn't in 17 is because theirs is based strictly on the capture. It's not an actual direct tax, it's a capture on the other millages in the DDA district. They had gotten into a situation downtown where the capture was actually negative, so no money was coming into them from property tax. The only thing they did get is they would receive a reimbursement from the state for lost personal property taxes, and that number's kind of been bouncing around a little bit. It's a little confusing, the state's formula. The other thing that's a little confusing is the state keeps telling us to put it in different places, so it doesn't look real pretty when you look across the, at first they treated it like a, first they told us to use this count 441, then they decided no, it's kind of a property tax, and then they come back later, and now I guess this is hopefully their final answer. The state's saying no, it actually, we want you to set up a new account. It's a 573 account, and it's, either way, it's the same money, but it's a reimbursement from the state for lost personal property taxes. And it's been running anywhere from about 12,016 up to this year it was 13,941. You never know exactly. Yep.
Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry. When you say lost personal property taxes, what exactly are you meaning?
With personal property tax reform, the state is eliminating personal property taxes. So in that process, they decided, or they agreed that they had to make local units whole.
Right.
So in the process of eliminating, so instead of collecting it direct from the taxpayers, the state goes through this long, confusing computation and determines how much they're going to reimburse us for that.
Thank you.
Yep. So, other questions on that? If I flip the page over, this department on the second page is the Peabody building. We hope it is finished in 18, so there's nothing projected for 19, but either way, it'll be a wash. Money comes in, it just flows through us, and then we just pay it right back out to the contractor, so there's no net effect on the DDA. And I say that, but there is a currently a $20 difference down there in the bottom. I'm not sure exactly what that is. I got to research that a little bit more, but that should just be a wash. I mean, we collect the money, that they put in a draw request, it comes into our account. If everything's approved, we just forward it on to the contractor, so there won't be any effect one way or another on DDA from that. So flipping the page again.
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
Councilman Brown.
Sorry. Those grant funds are flowing through the DDA?
Correct. Because it was a downtown project.
I understand.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
I understand that, but
We did it kind of like the Bohm Theater was the same way. The Isman House was the same way. Like the Bohm's a good example where the city had no ownership of the Bohm, but the grant was awarded to the city for the renovation of that, and because it was a downtown building, the decision was made to run it through the DDA. Same when they did the sidewalks on downtown in 13 or 14, that all flowed through the DDA as well. And again, the bottom line is going to be a wash of whatever funds you put it in, so.
thank you. I was just, I don't know. I didn't know that those grant funds were flowing through the DDA, so I was just a little taken aback.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Yep. The next, or the page that, Department 735, we're still in DDA, but Department 735 is where DDA's main expenses are. And if you look down, there's some big expenses. This transfer out, $75,760 for 18. The reason the property tax was so high a couple pages earlier is because of the new hotel. So it jumped way up to $75,000 roughly. Through the agreement made between the DDA and the brownfield, which was established because of the hotel property, DDA has to forego it. They'll capture the money, but then they have to transfer it over and give it back to the brownfield. So it's kind of confusing, but if you look at the district of downtown, you've got all these parcels downtown. DDA will continue to capture on every single parcel, including the hotel. But on that hotel property, there was an agreement that they give that money, they captured just from that parcel, to the brownfield. So their net capture, when you take out the brownfield, is only like $600-700. And again, that's because they had gotten a situation where the properties downtown had declined so much in value, there was actually negative capture. That is actually coming back slightly. So, and I think too, like the brewery is not on this roll yet, of course, in 18. There are some other things, going on. So I think we'll see that change quite a bit going forward. But flipping the page again, we're in another one of them situations where the next one's that Isman House renovation. Again, that only is appearing because of 16 activity, nothing for 17, 18, or 19. Flip the page again, and we get down to, oops, I'm sorry, I keep doing that. I went one too far. where it says Isman House at the top. If you look at the very bottom of that one, that actually shows the DDA's beginning and ending fund balance based on where we think we're going to end up. So for 18, we're projecting ending up with about an $8,354 profit. For 19, we're looking at a $10,250 profit, and that would give us a ending fund balance in 18 of $62,879, and in 19 of $73,129. Questions on that? All right, now we get into hopefully something a little bit easier. The next fund is $250. That's our CDBG fund. Nothing has really gone on with this in a long time. These were back from 70s and 80s, and then I think there's a few in the 90s. And it seems like there might have been a couple in the early 2000s. But anyway, these were grants made, of course, years ago by the city when they had a CDBG program. And they would give grants out to the houses around town for renovation. Like I said, there's been no new grants going on. The only thing that really goes on with this fund now is it continues to collect a little bit of interest from the bank, from the money sitting in there. And periodically, when one of those houses sells, they will contact us, and depending on how the original promissory note was written, they may, when they sell the house, have to pay back that grant that they received. And matter of fact, we just had a call on one of those today. So, like I said, usually maybe once or twice a year, you get a little bit of money coming back in where someone sold a house, and there was a promissory note on it, and they're required to pay it off. But those, again, are just hit or miss. You never know when they're going to happen. So,
Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So do we know how many of those properties we have out there? And,
Yep.
well, I guess if you could answer that, I might be able to figure out the answer to my next question.
I can't give you a number off the top of my head, but we have two spreadsheets because there were two different programs. I'm going to guess, and again, this is strictly a guess going by memory, probably, I don't know, maybe 30 properties, I'm guessing, maybe roughly 15 in each program that are left. And again, that's a guess. I'd have to double check and let you know.
So I'm assuming until those properties are sold or whatever, that fund just has to sit there until all those properties are.
Well, it's an interesting question because the last full-time planner that we had tried to get with MEDC or CDBG at the state of Michigan and try to figure out, because apparently when the programs were going strong, when some of these require payments, like monthly payments on these mortgages, some do not. Some are only due when the house property is sold, and some don't have any repayment. Some are strictly after so many years they just start forgiven. But based on the terms, some of the money, when people would make payments to the city, some of that money was supposed to be set aside and could be reinvested or re-loaned out for new renovation, and other money was supposed to be sent back to the state. But this going back, literally these files, I've seen them from the 70s and 80s before any of us were around, and even the state did not have documentation to really know, what's ours and what's the state's. So it's kind of been sitting there. We've worked through the county to do some more loans recently, using up some of that money. The state agreed for us to do that. So we've got the best. It's not like there's a ton of money sitting there, but it's really, the documentation is pretty poor going back that far. And I think a lot of times when the properties sell, we rely on the title companies even to find, if there are recorded notes and stuff, and it's just...
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Flipping the page, you get into ABA. Probably one of the little bit more cumbersome as far as all the multiple departments. ABA really doesn't have much revenue anymore, other than some rental revenue from some of their buildings. Years ago, they used to get a lot of revenue, of course, from Maple Grove, but that was split out, so Maple Grove is now in its own separate fund. The state kind of said, hey, you got to do that. You can no longer kind of commingle the money. So when that happened, ABA lost the biggest source of its revenue, obviously, from some of the Maple Grove money. So really, on the first page, the only thing we're really looking at for Maple Grove is some interest income and some other miscellaneous. They, like I said, they don't really have much of a revenue income stream. If I flip the page, Department 260 is ABA's actual general operating. That's where we pay some professional services, some admin fee that is paid to the general fund for work that we do for ABA. But that's really, again, without any income. They really don't have any expenses or can't afford to, bear many expenses. So there's not much on that page. If I flip over again, Department 264 is the EDC building. So you'll see in 18, there's $135,000 coming in. That was from the sale of the EDC building. And of course, since the building is sold, there will be no income or expenses for 19. There was a little bit of rent that came in before the building was sold, and a little bit of expense incurred before the building was sold. But again, nothing for 19. And flipping again to the next page, Department 265 is for 201 North Clinton, which is the Edwards building down there, the customer building down there. They pay $1 a month rent, plus they also pay some additional, what we call, I think they call it, I don't know, it's an additional amount they've agreed to pay to cover the property taxes. Unfortunately, because it's a for-profit business that's in there renting it, even though it's owned by ABA, we have to pay property tax on it. And unfortunately, I think they need to maybe look at that agreement again, because the property taxes now exceed the amount that AG Edwards is paying in for that. So at any rate, it's not short a lot, but it's about $400 or $500 short. So they're actually losing a little bit of money on that property. But flip to the next page, 101 Gale Street. There's very little activity in 18 and 19, even 17, and that is because an agreement was made where Albion Department of Public Safety pays all the expenses. The exception is it needed a new roof this year, so ABA did agree to step up and pay for the roof, and I think they did it with the idea that they had the proceeds from the sale of EDC, so they had that big influx of cash. So then they decided they could afford to cover the cost of the roof repair out at the Gale Street property. Other than that, ABA doesn't really have any expenses on that particular building. And flipping the page again, Department 271 is the fire ambulance building, and we receive rent, of course, from Department of Public Safety and also from Huron Valley Ambulance. There is supposed to be an agreement, there is an agreement where we are supposed to look at the difference between the rent that came in and the expenses incurred to keep the building going, utilities and everything else, and we're supposed to give or refund 40% of that back to Huron Valley Ambulance. That's what that rent adjustment number is. We have done it 16 and 17. Of course, we have not gotten to the end of the year in 18 yet to determine, what that amount's going to be, and we're just kind of have to estimate that going into 18 and 19, or into 19 rather. Yep. Question.
Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So looking at the projected, in the active. Never mind, I answered my own question.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay. I know, we're going through them kind of quick, I apologize.
No,
And
it's
definitely
Got it.
see me afterwards or whatever, if you have questions or whatever. Flipping the page again, Department 273 is 112 Erie Street, or the Food Hub. Kind of like Gale Street property. ABA does not really incur much expense on that because the Food Hub is paying almost all the expenses. And again, there was an exception. They found there was a structural weakness. I guess one of the beams under the floor was bad, and they felt it probably should have been something picked, or possibly maybe picked up back when they renovated the building. Either way, it was a building structural concern that the Food Hub didn't feel that they should have to pay it, so ABA again stepped up and agreed to pay it. And the only other expenses that ABA pays on that building on an ongoing basis is, I guess there's 3 or 4 electric meters at that building. One, of course, is the Food Hub, all the kitchen, all the stove, all that stuff. Food Hub pays that. There are some other meters for, my understanding is for the future, if they get apartments or something upstairs or different parts of the building. And ABA is paying those other meter charges, and most of the time the usage is very, very minimal. They're a very small bill. Just I think more of a meter, because the meter's in service, I think is basically what they're paying, is just a meter charge on those other 3 meters. And if you look at the bottom of that page, then you'll see that the projected revenue over expenditures, thanks to the sale of the building, is $95,270. That would make their fund balance jump up considerably from $121,000 up to $216 rather. I'm sorry, I'm getting old, need glasses here. And in 19, we're looking at a revenue over expenditures of $170 roughly, and the fund balance remaining, of course, about unchanged at $216,508. Questions on that one?
Okay.
Flipping over, now we get into some real easy ones. These are some debt service funds, and the first one is the energy. There was 425 property, an energy study, a new generator purchased, all within one big bond issue. All these funds do is they are set up to pay the annual payments for the bonds that we have, and depending on what departments or funds benefited from the bond issue, they all kick in some money to cover the annual payment. And on the first one there, at the top it shows what our annual principal and interest would be for each 18 and 19. Each bond company also charges an annual fee. The payment then you'll see is for 18, $180,600. For 19, it's $180,400. And then down below, we transfer in, as I said, money from the departments that benefited from the energy study and from getting the generator and all that kind of stuff. So money is just transferred in from those other departments. When we get the invoice to pay the annual payment, we just write the check out of this fund, and then we're good for another year. Questions on that one? The next one, Fund 364, same type of thing, only this was for a general obligation bond when they did the water project. The interesting thing with this one, you'll see there's no activity in 19, and if you read the footnote, this one actually matured in the final payment was actually October of 17. However, this particular bond issue was covered by a millage. That millage, I don't know if you noticed on your summer tax bill, but that millage came off of the 2018 summer tax bill. But if you think about how taxes are collected, many times, like number one, people have until February, so you go into the following year to pay your, so 17 had that millage on there still. People are still able to pay that tax bill up through February. Plus, in about May, we get a settlement check from the county for any unpaid delinquent taxes. So even though this got paid off, there were still prior year taxes that were collected. So they came into this fund. The $47,000 that's shown as an expense is basically just, we're estimating what our total that's going to come in by the end of the year from prior year taxes, and the $47,000 will just clear out that this money, and basically it'll probably be transferred over to the general fund. And if you look at the bottom, that zeroes the fund balance to zero, and the fund balance goes away, or the fund will go away basically in the future, because the debt's paid off. There's no more millage issued for it, so it'll be cleared out.
And you said transferred into the general fund?
That is probably going to be my recommendation. I need to check into it a little bit more to be sure there isn't any complications or issues with that, but we'll see. Actually, sewer and water will probably get a little bit of that too, because there was an extra portion on their non-resident tax bills, or non-resident sewer and water bills to help cover this. So sewer and water will probably get a little of that too. So. Flipping the page, Fund 369, Albion Building Authority bond. Again, same type of thing. This is the bonds that were issued for the construction of the fire barn, and also when Maple Grove had the fire and was renovated. And because of that, money is coming into this fund from both Maple Grove and from Public Safety and from Huron Valley Ambulance. They all contribute money to this fund to cover the annual bond payments. And again, we try to set it up to where we're just bringing in enough each year to cover that year's payment. So, questions on that? So I'm going to flip 2 pages so we get down to Fund 374, the DPW building. Again, this is the same type of thing. When we purchased the street garage from the county, we set up a debt service fund, which is this Fund 374. Again, the departments that use that building are charged an amount that gets transferred in, and it just covers the annual payment. The annual payment to the county is $15,000 every year until it's paid off. So again, we're transferring money in from all the various DPW departments and funds that use the building, and then that money is used to pay the annual bond, or the annual payment to the county. Questions on that one? And we're getting down there. Now we're into a couple trust funds. Fund 732, Public Safety Pension Trust. I don't know what to say about this one. This, Public Safety Pension Trust is obviously a bunch of money invested to cover the pensions of the officers, police fire officers. The problem with having a whole large chunk of money invested like that is you're really reliant or depending on the outcome of the current market, investment market. You can see big swings in gains and losses. Sometimes they're recognized, sometimes they're unrecognized just by whatever the market values are at the close of business day, so you see these big swings, but again, it's all primarily the revenue and or expense primarily is just the swings in the market. I will say this about our public pension fund is talked about around the state. It's probably one of the strongest. It's about 100, and I think last I looked around 158 or 160% funded, which is just unheard of. Everybody around the state. I mean, I've gone to pension meetings or conferences and listened to people that have 20%, 30%, 40% funded. I mean, ours is, everybody would die to have a pension fund like this. So it's in really good shape. Again, it can depend a lot on what happens with the market. but we try to be pretty conservative working with the investors, so they're not doing anything crazy with it, and it's been a successful strategy, and it's held strong for a long, long time. So, questions on that one? Next fund 735, Albion Trust. I think most of you are familiar with the Albion Trust. Primarily, the only thing occurring in there each year is the earnings from investments, interest, dividends, or gains, losses, whatever. The exception would be is if anyone approaches them and asks them for assistance to finance or to cover, expenditures like the city has done in the past. I think the last one to do so was the Isman House in 16. I think they transferred $50,000 over to help finance the Isman House renovation. And again, other than that, the fund that just sits there and earns interest and dividends. So it's a nice little asset for the city to have. Question.
Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. The $50,000, is that eventually going to be transferred back, or is that just a gift?
Gift, more or less, yep. And most of theirs have been. I'm not aware of any times that they've actually asked for it to be, not just for Isman House, but any of the ones they made. I'm not aware, and I'm not saying that they couldn't, but I'm not aware that they ever have required it. Flipping the page to the page everybody probably wanted me to do first because it's the last one. Fund 737, Retiree Healthcare Fund. And this is just simply, it's pretty simple basically. It's a fund that's about 2001 or 2, the city tried to set up or did set up a self-administered retiree healthcare fund. Over the years we realized it probably wasn't that great of an idea because when you get into IRS requirements and stuff, there's actually a lot of legal stuff that has to, the criteria that these types of funds have to meet. So we actually kind of abandoned this, went to a regular fund administered through the ICMA or MERD that we use now. But at the time we did that, we gave everybody an option to get their money back because it probably wasn't. It was questionable the way the money was accumulated in there, and without giving people a vesting period to become vested, and then if they left employment, does that money go with them or doesn't? A lot of this stuff wasn't worked out. So we just give everybody an opportunity. Listen, across the board, if you want your money back, you can have it back. And everybody agreed to get their money back, except for 5 members that were either retired at the time and drawing on it, or about to retire and about to start drawing on it. And the good thing for the city about this is it was set up to where when the retirees hit Medicare age, their monthly benefit, not so good for them obviously, but the monthly benefit dropped substantially with the idea that they'd be covered under Medicare. So the annual debt obligation to the city is very, very minimal. For all 5, it's roughly $2,500 a year. And like I say, it ranges from, I think the lowest is like $24 a month to the highest of $48 a month. So until those, that'll just continue as long as they're willing to draw on it. So, any questions? And again, it was quick, I know, and definitely feel free, to catch me anytime if have questions, get a hold of me. And also, we're going to discuss too, maybe setting up the other meeting, or is that like?
We'll probably do this under future agenda items.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
In the regular meeting. Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I thank you for answering all my questions and doing a thorough.
I'm glad you have. Because that shows you're looking at them and understand. Trying to study it. So that's good. I'm glad to get the questions. So.
Thanks.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion from council. We'll move on to public comments, persons addressing the council. We ask that you limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. We ask, well, it shouldn't be agenda items. This should just be a general. But we ask you to observe proper decorum. Are there any comments this evening? Okay. That was simple. Seeing none, I ask for a motion to adjourn the study session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Support.
Okay, all those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Okay, we've adjourned the study session. Thank you.